Welcome everybody to this second before the last talk that we're going to have. Here, again, the sponsors, you know them. Thanks a lot. What I'm going to talk about here is complexity in the company. Now, just to ask again here, who of you works in a company where you have, more than 2 or 3 people working together? Okay, everybody, great. Who of you is or manages other people? Also great. That's a great thing, because then this talk is really for you. So maybe some background. I'm not an IT or agile software development person. I come from management and leadership. And for many years I've done training and consulting on how to produce results with people. Because for me, call it management, call it leadership. By the way, I think the distinction between the two is purely academic, because I've never seen somebody pass a day where he say, today I did no management and only leadership, or the other way around. Never happened. So let's just talk about how to produce results with an organization, with a group of people, with a team, or with a whole company. And that's what I'm going to talk about here. Now, the problem with this job, the job of a manager, is that usually it is not the first job you learn. Usually you study engineering, you study science or something, and then you work on that job, and then you become a manager. And you say, whoa, what do I have to do? You've seen Giovanni's talk, all these books. I have to read all these books, I have to do, and now people are talking about emotional intelligence, and they're talking about that, and now the black swan, and now the blue ocean, and so on. And there is this kind of confusion. What is this job about, really? And what are the basics and the fundamentals of this job? The way I have taught this, and I'm going to show you this, for years, has been, let's break this down really to the fundamentals that you can learn sufficiently easily. They're not always easy to apply, but they're simple to understand. And then you can build from there onwards, just these fundamentals. However, in the recent years, I've come to the conclusion that this is just one layer and that there is another dimension. It has to do with things being always more connected and things being always faster in changing. And the experience that I've had is that in a certain way, we are getting towards this kind of situation. We just have this kind of tools, and that's what we apply because that's what we know. And yeah, the challenges that we are facing are different. Give you some example. I have this spring I have been with a company. We have done a lot of workshops in parallel about how improving the situation. And some of these things have to do, this process is not right, and that definition is not good, and this product is not good, and so on. And they've done that very well. And then they have things like, for example, when it comes to the pieces that, or it's a motor constructing factory. So the motors that they build, and in the middle of the process, they have to take them out because something is broken. What to do with them? They say, well, the process is there, it is good, but people do not live the process. So it's about the people, they don't stick to the process. What do we do? And the funny thing is, while we were working with these many groups, some people came to me and say, you know what, on group level, we have a process description of 13 pages, which tells you how to write the process description. And everybody was laughing and so on. Yeah, but this group, at the end of 3 days' work, what did they come up to solve their problem about the motors that were out of the process? A process description. But when they realized, it wasn't the problem with the process description, it's the only tool they have, Or I give you some other examples. For example, a company, this is a telephone company, and they have field service people. So if your phone box is not working well, or so something at your home connection, internet now, and whatever you have, they go there and they try to fix the thing. If possible, this one visit that they pay, they fix it. And sometimes they have to come another time because they don't have the spare part in their car. Now the problem is that the way it has been defined with who has the budget for the spare parts and who has to keep them in stock and so on, it is not the field service people who can decide what pieces they have in their car, ready for when it's being used, but it's some other departments who decide that. And so they feel like a victim of these other departments, because sometimes they know now is a time when we have this kind of piece that's going to break all the time because it's winter, and in winter that usually happens, but they're not allowed to put it in the car. They have to go and have a second visit. So this for me is a typical example of the tool not being at the level of the challenge. Or just to give you another example, this was actually a company that underwent a digital change. It was a company that was in Switzerland and Germany. It was responsible for developing films, the pictures. Remember the old time? I don't know how it went in Lebanon, but in our time you got these kind of, every now with the post you got these kind of envelopes, and you put the film in it, you write your address in it, you send it, and a week later you get the photos back. Now with digital, you can imagine that's no longer the case. Now they have quite well managed the change into the digital in terms of now we do calendars and books and things, and you can online compose your things, and people still want things on paper and they want a good quality. So for this company, business is going on. But they have one big challenge. And this is about shift and peaks and shifts. So it's a planning, how many resources do we need, when. You can imagine in the old times, what do you imagine? When were the peaks that all these envelopes came in with the pictures? So one is after Christmas, exactly. So this being Europe, another one was after the Easter holidays. And of course after the summer holidays. So you always knew at the end of these holiday times, you have a peak. You could plan for it, they had some people who were working part-time, so everybody come in and everybody work here, no holidays for the people of this company in this period. Now we're moving to digital. Do you have any idea when the peaks are of orders in the digital age to these kind of calendars and books and so on? So when do digital photos, when do they want to have them developed? No, there are peaks. Always after a rainy Sunday. Now you can imagine, you have to do your shift planning according to the weather. So, completely different way, completely more, we call it agile, right? I mean, you have to be very flexible. When this Sunday it's bad weather, you will have a peak on Monday. So a completely different way, and the old tools are not adequate. Now, before I go on with my talk here, I would like you to do something. You turn around, and, well, not everywhere, but sometimes you find people behind you. Hopefully you don't know them yet. And just in groups of 2 or 3, and sometimes you have to, make a few steps, exchange and find what is one example where you feel the same. You also feel you have this little cage and there is this huge challenge in your company. So that the tools, you would like to have a better tool at hand to manage the situation. Briefly, just a few minutes, talk about the situation and why you feel the tool is inadequate. And just in case somebody says, no, I have all the tools that I need, everything is adequate and so on, I could just tell you, maybe you think about something else. You think about why you're getting too much money for your job, because you're not really paid if you don't have any challenges. You're not paid the salary that you actually get. So I imagine everybody of you have some challenges. So let's just turn around, find people whom, if possible, you don't know, present yourself. It's about 2 minutes per person. Just one example of what is it that's going on in your company where you think the tools, that's what we have, yes, but it would be better if we had something better. And we're going to work with that later on. Okay? Just take a few minutes. Okay, now I'd like you to switch. Let the other person tell an example. Okay. So I'd like you to come to a conclusion. Let's everybody face forward again. Now, I would like you to keep these examples in mind. We're not going to share them or something, but later on you can actually try to map them onto a system that I'm going to show you, or to a framework that I'm going to show you. My suggestion is, my hypothesis is, many of these examples have to do with the fact that the tools that we have are not ready for the degree of complexity and for the speed of change that we are facing. And now the question is, okay, so what is complexity? Now some of you have been in the workshop outside in the terrace this morning with me. You have had one way of experiencing what complexity is, really physically. And yeah, you remember? And I would like to show you some other things, just, you know, in your thoughts, to go through what complexity actually is, just to get the word clear or the meaning clear. Now, most of you are, who of you is by the way, just IT, engineering, this kind of mathematics maybe, these kind of degrees? Okay, so you might be at home with this. This, by the way, is a kind of, well, it's a minimal viable product in terms of, you see how I put it together. I still have to build this machine, and I want to build it, but I couldn't find the time yet to do it in a very simple mechanical way. Because what I want to show you is that the first level of complexity can be achieved by simple mechanical ways. It doesn't necessarily have to do with things like humans and interacting or nature or on any of these things. So imagine this black box. In the black box, there is a mechanism. And if you press now, for example, you press the button A and you get the first light on. You press the button B and you get the second light on. Now you can already imagine how this goes on, right? You press C, you expect it's probably the third light, and it goes on like that. We would call this a very obvious system. It's obvious we have a very high probability that we can conclude what the future will be when you go through these letters A. Now, let's make this a little bit more complicated. It's simple that if you press A, for example, it's the third light that goes on. You press B, it's the first light that goes on. So, you know, you're not sure with C which one of the two remaining lights will be. Or maybe it's actually another light that has already been on will be on as well when you press C. Who knows? That's complicated. Now let's go to complex. And I have to write this to you so it makes clear. Imagine now the system inside the box has two states. One state is white and one state is black. And in white, the connections between the buttons and the lights are different from when they are in black. And at the end of each connection, it says, when you press the button, in which state the system will be for the next turn. And that's the important bit. Now we connect what you press now with what color the system will have next time you press a button. So, for example, in the white system you press A and it shows the first light and the system turns black, but you don't see that. And now you press A again and you're in black and it shows the third light and the system turns white. You press A again, and if you continue pressing A, you get between the first and the third light back and forth. However, if you press other buttons, they have the same kind of thing. Sometimes the system stays, sometimes they use a light which has already been used by another button. I can tell you, we've done this several times, and we have done it since I haven't built the box yet. We've done it with a sheet of paper so that, you know, you make a group of twos, and the person says, okay, I press A, and the other says, okay, you get the first light. And I press B, and you get this. We have this kind of situation. The people never find out how it works, And however, the problem with this kind of people talking back to you, reading from a sheet, is you continuously get conflict because people then they tell to me, this other guy is making mistakes, it's not possible, he's reading bad from the sheet. You know, because they don't believe that something so simple can actually become complex because you make a loop, because you link the next round to the round that has been done before. So a very easy way, in technical terms, is computational complexity that you can produce in this way. Now, let's move one step further, because usually what we have to deal with when we are in a company, when we are dealing with teams, also when we are dealing with markets and customers, we have people inside. And now I show you something. It's probably not so much of a surprise here, but just to get you the example here. The sound is not important, I haven't connected it. Now, observe this traffic and try to find out rules. What are the rules in this traffic? It's not true that there are no rules, there are many rules. But yeah, by the way, you will see a pedestrian just in a few moments coming from the bottom right, I think. Yeah, well. You see a pedestrian over there. There will be another one. So, for example, One rule here would be never surprise the people behind you. Always be clear that you are going, not in one moment to the next you're turning left, but very slowly. You see this guy? Never change speed. There is actually at one time, this guy. No, well, I don't. There's one guy coming very fast at some point, and he's the only one who almost risks an accident in here. So never change speed very quickly. Accelerate or brake very quickly. Yeah, exactly. Or for example, another one which I find very interesting is try to form groups with others. If you see in front of you a group that are going in the direction you want, you follow this group. At a certain point, you have then another group coming in, and you realize it becomes difficult. So you go behind the next group that's crossed, and the people behind you will follow and make the next follow. It's like these kind of grapes that people form like that. Huh? So there are several of these kinds of rules. Everybody just thinks about the angle in front of you. Nobody looks back to find out what's happening behind, because that's the problem of the people behind. So you have these several kind of rules, and I will come back to what these kinds of rules are, that are actually guiding this complex system. Here, indifferent to the black box, we have people who think, people who interpret what they can see. So it's an intelligent reaction to what they can see. People who have an intention, they are not just passive and let things happen to them, like a leaf in a wind or something, but they have an intention. And what you also find out is that people develop a sense of identity. Who am I, what my role is? Maybe, if I have a big car, I can allow more things, people pay more attention to me, and things like that. So you also have this kind of identity, which is the difference between a complex system with human beings and a complex system from nature, or even this kind of mechanical computational complexity. So this is a kind of introduction to complexity. Now, how to address the complex system? I think there is one important bit that I would like to point out. For example, if we talk about agile, if we talk about the methods of agile, you will find that often people also say, yes, that's exactly one way of doing it. And up to that point, I would agree. Many of the principles within Agile, if you look at the Agile Manifesto, you will find they are actually very intelligent ways of dealing with complexity. However, there is a risk, and the risk we are observing at the moment in Agile. I have several clients who talk to me, where the managers speak to me and say, I have a problem. Because these people before, they have been in waterfall, and they had their spec sheet with the requirements on it, and say, I just do my little spec sheet and nobody can say that I didn't do my job well. And they don't think left and right with whom they should connect and what they should think about, which is not on the spec sheet, but it would be a good idea, and so on. And now you have some of them who just, instead of spec sheet, they take the story, and say, I have my little story, and I don't have to coordinate with nobody, and don't have to think about anything. And it's very difficult for Scrum Masters and other people in the team to kind of involve them and say, come on, open your mind, and be more, don't stick to your story in such a blind way. What happens at some point, I actually said, it looks like we are talking about the Scrum being something like the ISO certification. They say, okay, that's the way you do it, don't talk about it anymore, great, we don't have to think about it anymore, we just go ahead. And that's not good, because at that moment, we don't think about how could this system work in our context. I would like to give you a metaphor for that, and give you some Swiss example for that. Betty Bossi is a Swiss brand. It's actually an invented person. There was an author behind it who wrote these cooking books. So this is cookbook, recipe books, and it has become really a brand now. For the last 40 years, I think now it's in existence. And the great thing about these recipes is they promise they always work. So you don't have, it's not with these, put some egg in it and then it must not be hotter than 70 degrees, otherwise it will turn sour and things like that. You don't have these kind of recipes. You have recipes where a little bit more, a bit less, maybe you forget to switch the fire off and things like that. It doesn't matter so much. So they really have this high probability of getting a good result. That's a great thing. But now if you think about it, and I, for example, as a student, I've used these books, and I've produced a lot of wonderful meals, and everybody said, you're a good cook. Well, I just followed the recipe. These recipes work well as long as you have all the ingredients that are on the list in your fridge. If you forgot something, you know, and that's the difference to somebody like that. This is Tanja Granditz. It's my hometown of Basel. She's the chef of the highest ranking restaurant. This is 2 Michelin stars. At some point she had 3, but now apparently she's lost one. But anyway, what's the difference between somebody like her, or even on a lower level, a chef in a kitchen, or somebody who has a lot of experience in cooking, and somebody who knows how to follow the recipe book? The difference is that you have to know a little bit about why these things are like that. And then you can start to deviate from the recipe. You realize, oops, you know, this guy says now put butter in the sauce. I don't want it so greasy, or I don't have butter. Well, this is actually to bind the sauce. I can take flour as well. You have to know a little bit about which kind of sauces bind with flour as well as with butter and all these kind of things. So you have to know a bit more. Some people know it because they've learned some theory. Some people just know it from experience. You know, the typical kind of grandmother's recipe. Oh, how much do you put in? Well, as much as it needed. Oh, great. What's that? I can't tell you. You know, observe. So, but you have a kind of another level of knowledge which has to do with why things are like that. And so I invite you very strongly, if you go into methods like Scrum, but also into things that I'm going to show you, don't just blindly apply them. Try to find out about the why, because then, for example, you can build your own version which works better in your environment than maybe the example that you have heard. It's not about, you know, so many people Giovanni before talked about the Toyota way. So many people making a huge learning journey for a lot of money, go 1 week to Toyota, observe something which is the product of about 30, 40 years of company culture, and then they say, yes, now we copy-paste it into our company. It will never work like that. You can learn the principles, and then you can go back and let your company grow something. And that would be an appropriate way. By the way, just when I said the word let, I find it very funny when you look to kind of senior managers, you know, who sometimes have this kind of macho, I'm the great achiever and so on image. They like management as something when they say, that's about making things happen. And sometimes I like, just as a little provocation, to tell them, what about letting things happen? You know, letting things emerge just by creating the condition. Let's have a look what that could mean. So, next question. Who knows that? That's the Cynefin framework by Dave Snowden. Just hands up. Yeah, okay. Ooh, very few. Okay, so I'm going to give you an introduction. The great thing about this is it is the end of the management method that is the good method always and everywhere. Because, by the way, like Giovanni told it about situational management, it depends. It depends what context you're in, and then you choose the appropriate management method. It doesn't mean anything goes. It doesn't mean you can do just anything. It means you have to choose the appropriate one according to the situation. Yeah? Now, here we are talking about 4 kinds of contexts that you're in. So one is the obvious one, where you remember you press A and you get the first light, you press B and you get the second light, and so on. So this is the typical world of industrialization, where you have a process and it's very clear, you have a look at your situation and it's obvious, this is situation type B, and so I answer with procedure type B. And over years and years and years this has been developed, and since nothing is changing, you can go actually quite far with that. A lot of, industry, the whole scaling idea, you know, big quantities and therefore it can be cheaper and so on, all relies on this. Trying to get things into this domain here and then managing it accordingly. Now, however, when we go back to the buttons, when you press A and you don't get the first light but maybe the third light, you have to play around a bit to find out what is going on. Let's call this complicated. Mm-hmm. And in complicated, what you have is you still have causality, there is still a cause and effect, but it's more difficult to find out the causes. Typical situation in projects. So you go, you analyze the situation, you try to learn about this situation, you use expertise, then you pull back, you make a concept, you make a pilot maybe, and then you implement it. Now this works well as long as the world is the same when you implement your solution as when you did the analysis. But when it has changed, And when some different things happen, this will no longer apply. And we are actually talking about the complex. So in the complex world, what's happening is you don't have the clear causality anymore. If something produces an effect now, and maybe a second time, and maybe a third time, you don't have the guarantee that the fourth time it will produce the same effect. What you have is maybe the disposition, the tendency to produce that effect. Now you can go and calculate the probability, I don't know, but you have to always prepare for the moment that this same connection will not work anymore. We talk about patterns. Huh? You know, people, for example, have patterns of behavior, and then something grave happens, positive or negative, and they change their patterns of behavior. That's exactly what we're talking about. And then we have the chaotic. By the way, so what you do actually is, instead of go and analyze, you actually try to experiment as fast as possible. And I'm going to show you just in a moment what you do and how you then work with your experiment. Huh? And then you have the chaotic. The chaotic situation is where you have complete random. Usually, for example, a crisis is like that. But also if you have completely disconnected people, the famous wisdom of the crowds also has some elements of chaos in that. You can't really predict what's going to happen. What you have to do here usually is you have to act as quickly as possible and learn while you're running. You learn and improve while you're running. But the important thing is to get running as fast as possible. It's the firefighter mode. You don't want to be in there as long, but also usually this situation is not stable. Either the whole thing dies or you recover from it. You don't remain in this situation for a long time. Okay, so you have these 4 domains and you already see how you should manage them in different way. I'm just going to give you, Dave Snowden, the author of this model, has a great example which helps you memorize it. Let me give it to you. Maybe some people have already heard it, but I think there are a minority here. So imagine you all either have or know children. Huh? So you have children in your family, you can imagine what a children's birthday party is like. 9-year-olds, like that, birthday party. Now imagine you manage a children's birthday party in the way a complicated system is managed. What you would do at the beginning is certainly you would make a meeting of the parents to define the objectives of this children's birthday party, the values of the children's birthday party, which need to be, of course, in line with the vision of entertainment, with the vision of education of in general in your country. And then you will certainly put these values on posters, with like eagles soaring over values or with dropping into a pond, and you put these posters on the room where you will hold the children's birthday party. Then one of the parents will actually make for the children as a start kind of a motivational videotape, and you will show these motivational videotapes to the children, and then you will ask the children to show their commitment to these values on PowerPoint. You will then probably carefully select a number of pedagogical plays and things during the whole party, and you will tell the children, in order to get their engagement and their performance, that their next week's pay that they will get, the pocket money, will depend on their performance in the children's party. And if, for some reason, at the end of the party, the children are not happy yet, you get one of these, what is called, appreciative inquiry consultants in, who tells the children happy clappy stories so that they all go home and be happy again. That would be this way. Now I don't know how many of you work in large organizations, because honestly, the more you work in large organizations, the more you feel that's exactly how I feel. That's exactly how I am in there. Now, okay, so message, many times when you actually think it's a complicated world, but it's complex, because a children's party, I would say, is a complex situation, the tools for your complicated world don't apply. Maybe you have a connection to the examples that you have exchanged before at the beginning. Now, but how would you manage a children's party when you know and you go from the hypothesis, this is a complex world? Well, the first thing you have to do with a complex system is you have to draw some boundaries and say this is the limit of the system. So, for example, if you're in the garden, which is already great, we're going to not being fragile, right? We had that before. So when you're in the garden, you draw a line and says, look, anybody who goes into the rose bushes will die. And so you have a clear line. You maybe also have lines which are flexible. So for example, if you want children not to go on the street because it's dangerous, you say, don't go on the driveway. Because it could be that someone then by mistake goes on the driveway. It's not yet a dangerous zone. So you use these kind of buffers around your borders. Now you have defined your system. Now what you're going to do is you are actually going to make little experiments. You're going to throw in things, a football, a game, something to eat, and you're going to throw in one thing and then you're going to look what's happened. If it pulls, if people start being attracted by it, they start playing it, they are happy, you leave it like that. Maybe you can actually feed it and make it stronger. If it's either exaggerated, which, when it's boys, usually that happens at a certain point, right? You have to be able to cut it down. Or if it kind of becomes boring, you bring the next thing. So that's how you go through the whole, and hopefully you have several layers of plan B and C ready in case this one thing that you plan to do will not work. Okay, then we come with this. Okay, then we come with this. And for example, I don't know, when you know that this year football was a great thing, we had a great football game and everybody was happy, it doesn't mean that next year football will work too. Because it depends on the context, not just by the children going, but also what was the last party they have been to and what are their expectations and so on. So this kind of probe and then find out when it's going, okay, let's give more to the fire and let it grow and let it become stronger. But when it goes bad, also be able to dampen it. That's the kind of way you want to react and we want to manage in a complex situation. And that's the great advantage of the Cynefin framework. Now, what I would like you to do, just to get a bit used to this framework, you turn back to the people that you have talked to before, you take the examples that you have told each other, and you try, what does this system, this framework, what does it tell you concerning the examples? So the first thing is, what situation are you in there? What's the challenge? Is this a challenge that puts you in complicated, complex, chaotic? Where does it put you? And when you were talking about insufficient tools, that you say, the tools we have, we're not really happy with it. What are these tools good at? Because often what you find is that it's not just bad tools, but tools which are good somewhere else, but not in this challenge. So please take a few minutes, just how easy is it to kind of place the stories that you have told each other into this framework, and also make a difference, is the tool just not good, but it belongs to that part, or does it belong to somewhere else? Okay, just a few minutes again. Okay, I hope you have managed this, because that's just a way of using this framework. One is place your situation so that you can then know, okay, which is the drawer we have to open and where do we have to look for an approach to deal with this situation. That's one of the big uses, of the big advantages of this framework. So, now I'd like to take a step back, because I told you for several years I've done this kind of basic management training. I would like to show you the model that we use. We use models on different levels, company level, but also on the individual manager's level. And I want to show you a simple model that we have used and we have created. So the authors of this model, it goes back to Peter Drucker, but he hasn't put it in this context. He's put it across a lot of essays. And what then my former boss, Fredmund Malik, has done is he's put this together into a model, and it looks like that. So this is the wheel that we call the wheel of effectiveness, and it covers, if you want, the essential things you should master when your profession is that of a manager. It can be as a team leader, as a project leader even, or it can be as a CEO. You have a different, of course, kind of size of the tasks below you, but in principle, they are the same. So what you will find is in the beginning, in the middle, you have a sense of responsibility that comes with your job. Like an architect has a responsibility that the buildings don't break in when that he builds, or a doctor has a responsibility to cure for patients and not just to do his research. At the same time, as a manager, you have a responsibility towards the customer, the company, and the employees. Then you have principles, and I've listed them over there. These are just the essential principles of effectiveness as a manager, and I'm going to go through them because I think they're the most important of it. And then you have tasks and tools. So tasks, for example, like ensuring objectives, there must be objectives. People should know why they're doing things and what's the result they want to achieve. Organizing, decision-making, monitoring, measuring and judging, and developing people. Now, you can make your list longer if you want, but this is just an essential set. The same with tools. You have meetings, you have reports and communication, you have job descriptions, you have personal work methods, budgeting, performance appraisal, systemic abandonment. By the way, systematic abandonment, what we mean with that is you should ask regularly the question, what is the things that we stop doing? Not just the new things that we do, but also what do we stop? And we stop it in the whole organization because it doesn't make sense anymore, or it's too much, because we always have too much to do. So what do we abandon? Okay. And when you look now at the principles, things like, in the end, it's the result that counts. You know, it may be if you take a guest to a tour through Beirut, you know, and you find, well, yes, now we take the other road, and now we go there, and now it was great, but it's a traffic jam, and it goes slow. That's okay. You can tell a lot of things, I imagine, about all the sites that you have, and in the end, you have done 2 hours of tour, and no matter how far you've got or not, it was a great experience. But if you want to go somewhere else, if you are a business driver who has to deliver a parcel, you know, the traffic jam is a problem. What counts is the result. If you had a nice tour, that doesn't really count. So in the end, what counts is the result, and everything is second to the result that you want to achieve. Everything is a means to producing the result. Contribution orientation. I imagine you know these people, you know, who optimize either themselves or their teams on the cost of the rest of the organization. That's actually not good. Part of this job is to be oriented to what can I contribute to construct this whole building that we are doing together in this company. Concentration on the essential, you know the situation. If you do something that usually takes 50 minutes, and you can work for 50 minutes without interruption, that's a great thing. If you work 10 minutes, and then you do something else, and then you work for 10 minutes, and then a phone rings, and you have to take the phone call and do something, and then for another 10 minutes, you have 5 times 10 minutes. You will not have done the job. So if you concentrate, it becomes more efficient. So allow for concentration in the organization. Utilize existing strengths. We have such a tendency of working on our deficits. We have weaknesses, we're not good, you know, it's cool you learn that. Here you're insufficient, you have to work on it, yes. But when it's about the job, think about what people can do and how we can use them on what they are good at. Then they will be the greatest contributors. They will get the greatest results. They will be happy for it because it's a fulfillment that they get. So you have so many advantages. And only if that is not possible, because you don't have anybody who's really good at that, then you have to work on the weaknesses. But your first choice is optimize the use of the existing strengths instead of trying to turn a weakness into a strength, which is almost impossible. So difficult. Then trust. If you've lost your trust somewhere, you have to do so many things like inspections and contracts, and it's so difficult actually to manage people, especially when you want to manage for innovation, for creativity, for using the brains of the people and not just their hands. So building trust, keeping trust, not damaging trust is absolutely essential. The positive outlook as well. Pierre, you had me start 10 minutes late, so you have to give me that. Anyway, the positive outlook as well. Positive, I don't mean let's not look at the bad things in life. But let's always search also the opportunities and the chances in the bad things. Let's look at the bad things not in order to become very sad, but to fix them and then move on. So the positive outlook. And you see, just these principles, I personally have I've trained thousands and thousands of people, and this has been a part of this training in almost all of them. And this is the kind of thing that you can hang on your office wall or put as a screensaver. It reminds me of what is it really that you should be good at. And then maybe you start scribbling and adding your own things and so on. That's great. But just as a basis, I think that's very useful. Now, what I felt is that more you get into the complex world, more you get into a fast-moving world, this is a great basis, but it's not enough. Let's focus on the complex world, and let's do this with the same way, with some principles, with some activities. I don't call them tasks, because one of the things that happen in complex is that leadership is not necessarily only the things that the leader does, but something that happens in the team. It could be because of a team effort. It could be because of a document that actually, once we've written it and then we follow it. It could be by something that the leader does, but the leader is ultimately responsible that it's being done, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he has to do everything himself. So let's have a look at this version. So that's what it looks like. And by the way, just to give you the context, so Dave Snowden's company, Cognitive Edge, and we have co-developed this, and we are in the moment prototyping trainings on the basis of this. And we want to go on, we are not sure yet how, but we want to create some kind of community that you can join, maybe through a training, but then you can also stay in the community because there will be new things coming to that. This is just a selection of the essential, and we can actually then activate and keep this community active because we think the idea of evolving something is essential not only to the content but also to the way we want to give life to this thing. So you have the framework at the beginning. I think Cynefin is a good start. You have to have some mental models which help you deal with complexity, and you have to rethink some of your existing mental models because many of these are actually grounded in a complicated system, not in a complex system. Then you have the principles. Well, I'll go to the principles last because I want to say a bit more about that. You have the activities, like, for example, nudge for emergence. How do you create some framework conditions so that something emerges in itself amongst the customers or amongst your people, your team? How do you actually make a dynamic between exploring and being creative what's in the complex world and then taking it back into the complicated, because there you can structure it and there you can industrialize it and make money on it, and then come back again and get some innovation. And how can you have this kind of dynamic between the complex world and the ordered world? Making sense. This morning we were talking about the strategic storyline. That's exactly that thing. So making sense, managing constraints is about this opening and closing, how I said it with the children party. Experiment is clear. Manage by vectors. So you manage by objectives, great, but what if you can't define the end result that you want to achieve? You can just give a direction. So how do you do that? So we are building the kind of like smart objectives. We are building the same thing, how to build vectors, how to build heuristics, facilitate recovery. So this whole thing about how to work for resilience. And then you see a whole range of different tools that we can work. Distributed intelligence as a principle. So there is not the one truth. So you have to use the different perspectives and keep them as they are, and use this diversity of perspective and manage with it. You have to remove filters. Usually when you think about the classical reporting systems, there is so much that's getting lost. It's so much worth more either going into the situation and take some example and look yourself, or actually get a decision as fast as possible to the front, delegate, so that this actually works. The aligned autonomy, this morning in the workshop we were working about that. How can you make sure that people can act autonomously, but the general direction they take is the same? Work in small objects. If you think about agile, that's exactly it. Don't make the huge plan and then implement it, but small steps, and always go on with the small steps. And resilient, now I can make a whole discussion with Giovanni from before. I personally have the impression that anti-fragile uses a definition of resilient, which is not what is used really in complexity science. There we're talking about the same. So you can take what you have heard from anti-fragile before and use this for the idea of resilience here. I would like to conclude here. I would like just to make a few examples. So one is about managing constraints. I had a coachee once, and she said the problem is that the people, this is about the high voltage testing lab, these people are very good in recovering from mistakes, but they're not good at learning. And one thing that she did is actually she said, okay, I'm going to let you have a morning meeting. The topic of the morning meeting is today. Maybe a little bit tomorrow and maybe a little bit yesterday, but most topic is today, and I'm not going to be present. And it's going to be 10 minutes. Not more. You would say, whoa, this is very little instruction. Start every day. And people started. And for the first time in the history of this institution, you had, for example, after 2 weeks, a RACI chart on the wall where they start kind of changing, okay, who does what and how can we improve this? You had a lot of measures that came out of it. Now, Another example that, and Pierre, just for you to know, I'm going to conclude in a moment. Another example is actually from the same high voltage testing, and with that I'm going to conclude. In the high voltage testing, what they had is, they had a problem that because it was in a huge group, and people sent things, and they got an offer how much the test would cost because it was built internally, and they never confirmed the offer. And every now and then you had a very awful discussion afterwards when it's about paying the bills, and people say, no, we don't want to pay that. And you had these very bad discussions. So they invented a rule, and they said, okay, when the offer is not confirmed 2 weeks before the test will not take place. Now you can imagine this rule has never been applied, and once somebody tried it and it went so much high up in management and came back with so much force, nobody ever tried that again because it's not realistic. What we have developed is a heuristics or a rule of thumb which says, as an employee of the testing lab, always make sure that the customer has realistic expectations. This is very general. How to apply that and what that means with which customer, where it's okay and where do I want to have an email conversation and where do I phone him in order to get the confirmation. It depends. Have a look. But you are responsible for the realistic expectations of the customer. That changed everything. So that would be an idea of how to manage, in this case now, with a vector. So as you see, there are many things that you can apply here, but again here, I would invite you, many things also you can find on the internet. Use this and start exploring. And with that, well, oops, yeah, that was actually I had, so on the slideshare you will find some writing concerning these different examples that I've made. With that I would like to conclude. Just as a conclusion before the other people come in, one of the things I do as a hobby, and this is kind of also how to nudge people, I write fairy tales for leaders. If you want to connect to that, you come to me, I give you a card with the internet address on it. Okay? Thank you very much.